Yeah, the little group, yes, and the little group. So what I like about like they were saying he was, everybody knew he really spelled it out and told what he did. I'm a fireman. I thought maybe he said Dave. I think he said.
Who are you?
Yeah,
What's your name?
I'm pretty sure he's.
She did something this morning, I can't remember what it was. Trying to remember what she did in vain this morning.
Well, I just asked her what she said.
Teddy announced she was gonna do something and we heard, what? Okay, Rich turned around, she didn't.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we'll go ahead and get started here. Keep in mind what we're doing right now is just looking at some very specific products or tools, I guess, that people will typically run into in their lifetime in some fashion or form. If you don't run into them, someone you know will run into them. And some of these things, either due to a misunderstanding of how it works or due to a misuse either by the individual or sometimes by the ignorant professional that recommended it in that situation, results in just a lot of heartache, a lot of frustration. So last time I went over the kind of design and structure of credit cards. Did anyone have any other questions about those? Just kind of a summary that I came to, like I mentioned, it's something that by its design, if properly used, can have benefits. But it is something within the way our society functions that can create temptation as well. And there's a lot of people that get locked into that. So that's really, where so much of this, the way I'm trying to present this information is this is how it works. This would be the good use for it, but it's up to every individual how they, anything can be abused. We talk about that all the time. Broccoli is good for you. If you eat too much broccoli and it's not good for you. So things used in the appropriate way, and again, the whole idea behind the approach of this study is we've been given resources of different kinds by God, one of which is our finances. Ultimately, as members of the church, those finances are designed to go towards the effort of evangelism, go towards the effort of furtherance of the kingdom. But it comes down to stewardship between you and God. God's given you what He's given you, and it takes those godly principles of self-control and patience and wisdom in how to do those things. So, no other questions on credit cards? Are you sure? I ran into a lot of questions in my days in the bank. Okay. I want to talk about vehicle leases today. In my experience, pretty much every other human being I've ever met does not understand how vehicle leases work. So I wanted to talk about these. I didn't know how they work either prior to when I worked at the auto dealership. Part of my big potluck of strange experiences. They actually very aggressively began to shift to demonstrating and presenting leases, and they actually had a training company that came in and taught us, here's how they actually work. No one knows how they work. Everyone thinks they're horrible and all this stuff. Here's how they work, and it's really pretty fascinating. It's kind of an interesting design. Some common misconceptions. I had this on credit cards. They're evil. They're evil. They're horrible. My Uncle Billy had a lease, and it was just a big mess. And the reality of that is the majority of the time that has developed the bad rap for vehicle leases, they were structured completely wrong. They were from day one. They were structured wrong by the sales. It took two to tango. It took the customer wanting the benefits of the lease. It took the salesman not willing to actually analyze and make an appropriate recommendation. But they are not evil. It is another way to finance the purchase of a vehicle that we'll talk about. But all that who here has actually heard someone complain or had personal bad experience with a vehicle? I mean, almost everyone has heard someone, or even, a lot of what I'm going to speak of today, sometimes even can relate over to equipment. I know farmers at times usually, choose to utilize leases on equipment and things. So another common misconception is, well, it's a bad investment. It's a bad investment, I need to buy that car because that's a good investment. But leasing it is a bad investment, okay? Another one is you build no equity because you're essentially renting the vehicle. Not completely accurate, at least that mindset, okay? I think people instantly think, well, when you rent a house, you build no equity. You build none. I mean, you could rent for 20 years and have nothing left to show for it, is their idea. So the idea is, why would anyone lease when they could buy? That way you're building equity. Mileage and wear and tear charges are unfair. A lot of times when people have had bad experiences, they remember the part that I can show up and turn in my keys and walk away. Well, they show up to turn in their keys and they say, hey, you're 7,000 miles over on your allowance, so you owe 15 cents a mile. Please hand us X amount of dollars, hundreds of dollars, which has become a big issue for that. I mean, they weren't expecting that. I mean, punching the gut. So a lot of people feel that those things are unfair. I'll show you the reality of some of those things today. And leases never make sense if you're going to put high mileage on the vehicle. I've run into people that have a little bit of a basic idea of a vehicle lease that most of the time has come through a bad experience of a friend or family member or themselves. And they think, well, maybe I would lease if I hardly ever drove, if I just drove around town. Man, if you're driving high mileage, it's completely ridiculous. You would never want to do that. Again, that's not necessarily the case. There were many, many times at Goodwin Brothers where a lease made sense for an individual that was commuting to the next town. And it worked out pretty well in certain circumstances, which I'll talk about today. So, okay, here's how it works, how it actually works. What happens is, and I'm a visual person, so I'll show you this here in a second. I couldn't find anything on the internet that made sense the way, so I drew my own world. And I always used to do that with customers. So here's the way it works, okay? If you imagine the value of a vehicle as, I always demonstrate it as a line, okay? And so you start with the sticker price of that vehicle. Subtracted from that sticker price, let's say you choose to chew up the salesman a little bit and say, hey, can you give me $1,000 off the sticker price? That reduction comes off that amount. Then all credits come off that amount. So if you're looking at a new vehicle, a lot of times there's rebates. $2,500 to buy the truck, or $1,000 to buy the truck. Down payment comes off of that. I want to put $1,000 down to lower my payment. Trade-in allowance. If you actually trade in a vehicle and have positive equity, that comes off that amount. So once you've taken all that stuff down, and as you'll see in our example, let's say you started with a $30,000 vehicle and you take those things down, and you're left with $26,500, okay? The company is then going to determine, based on how much of the vehicle you're going to use in a time frame. So that's where you see advertised, this is a 12,000 mile a year, 3-year lease, okay? What that is actually doing is that is allowing the company to say, okay, if they are going to use that much of the vehicle, this is what we hope is the value at the end. That is the residual value, okay? So the amount that actually gets financed within this lease is the sticker price minus all the credits with the residual value taken away, and you're paying that part in between. So again, I mentioned imagining as a line. I'll show you the illustration here in a second because it makes perfect sense. But what you end up doing is you that line ends up having a point on it somewhere. You pay the portion of the line to that point, and then you're presented with options. And that's different from a conventional loan because the 2 points are the beginning and the end of the loan. You start financing it, When you pay your last payment, you're done. Leases are different. I always used to describe them as, imagine a loan with a midpoint where you have options. In a lot of ways, a lease works very similar in that way. So you pay that first portion, then have options what to do. The point on the segment is determined by how much of the vehicle you will use during that term. Again, okay? This demonstrates it perfectly, I think. Okay, so let's say you start with this value of a vehicle. This is the sticker price on this vehicle is $31,000. So we start here, and then we start taking our credits away. So let's say we have zero down payment, no down payment, but there's $3,000 in rebates. I'm not trading anything in, so there's no plus or minus there. But then, you know, the dealer was willing to negotiate $1,500 off the sticker price. So that value then, this huge $31,000, instantly shrinks. This has gone away because of the reductions. Based on the fact that you're going to drive 45,000 miles in 3 years, the dealer or the financing company looks in a book that's essentially governed by trends, statistics, the government oversees it, and they say this vehicle, whether it's a Jeep Cherokee or a Toyota Corolla or whatever it is, they say it should hold this much of its value after the person has driven that. And that's where you get your residual value. So let's say in this situation, this $31,000 vehicle after 3 years should be worth $15,500. The lease simply finances this. This is what you do. So you are, you know, the idea is you are paying for that usage of the vehicle. And that's where some people, you know, kind of compare it in a way to renting. Okay. But, you know, it's kind of like someone renting an apartment. They're getting value out of that because of their usage of the apartment or their usage of the house. Okay. When you go to go to an airport and you rent a car for a week and a half, you know, yes, you're paying different various fees. It all comes down ultimately to you're using some of the life of that vehicle, and therefore that's where your fee comes in. So in this situation, this is the portion paid during the lease. Sometimes it's called depreciation. You are literally paying for the depreciation you are causing on the vehicle. And in addition to that depreciation, the finance company, just like with a loan, has an interest rate built in there. And one cool thing, I'll talk about a lease here in a little bit, you pay sales tax on each payment. Okay? If you buy a vehicle cash when you go to the dealership, when you pay sales tax? Right there. That's not the case with a lease. You pay the sales tax as part of each payment. And in this situation, these numbers, so what actually ends up going into the lease is $31,000 minus $4,500. Then this whole residual, we don't mess with that right now. So this lease in this example would be based on $11,000 for 3 years with a 45,000 mile limit, which I'll talk about. And that results in a $373 payment. That's a brand new $31,000 vehicle. And again, I'll address this. But you can see why lease payments are normally, when you open your paper and there's that big color ad in the paper from the dealership, none of those advertisements are loan payments because loan payments are way higher. All of them are lease payments. And I want you to notice a couple things here too. Those lease payments are funny to me sometimes because you'll see the Mercedes commercial. You know, drive away with a new Mercedes for only $399 a month. And then down at the bottom, by paying $4,000 down. The thing with a lease is you can make your payment whatever you want based on what you put down. That's why the marketing to me sometimes seems slightly, it's not necessarily deceptive, but the lease payment on the Mercedes could be $30 a month if you paid enough down. But that down payment is all this is the section we're dealing with. We're not dealing with the whole car. And you're going to see why that matters here in a second when I show comparison. Because that down payment has a larger effect on a smaller portion of the value of the car. Okay? But so in this situation, out of $31,000 of the value of that vehicle, we're really only addressing 11. That's why what the payment is. Again, I think it'll help explain. But any questions on this illustration? You guys kind of with me at the moment? I can go back.
Does the 373 include the sales tax?
That includes sales tax and interest. Here's what it looks like in a breakdown. Exact same numbers. We have a vehicle loan here. We have a vehicle lease here. Let's do the loan first, okay? You walk into a dealership, you have a $31,000 loan. You get the dealer to take off enough money to get it down to $29,500. There's rebates on it. New vehicles usually come with rebates. $3,000 comes off that, you're left with $26,500. Let's say that you're the typical customer and you don't really want to pay $1,855 out of pocket, so you're going to finance the sales tax, okay? If we add 7% in the state of Indiana, our sales tax is still 7%. We add that back, the total amount to be financed is $28,355. Let's say you get a pretty good rate. I know sometimes I don't really know if the 0% for 60 months still exists. I know sometimes they might, but let's say you get 2.5%. That's pretty good amount on a new vehicle. If you do that at 60 months, you have a $503 payment. Okay, financing $28,355, 60 months, $503 payment. That means you start on day one, you drive the truck for a month, you start making your payment. When 60 months is done, you own that vehicle. It's yours, whatever it might be worth. Okay. Let's say instead you lease that vehicle. Same deal here. Let's say you talk them down, $29,500. You got the rebates involved. This is the amount that we're down to. Then we're going to take out the residual value. The dealership is going to say, okay, here's the deal. If you do this lease we suggest, we expect the car at the end of this term to be worth $15,500. So we're not even going to address that. We're not going to mess with that. You're left with $11,000. At that point, it's as simple as I'm going to take this $11,000 and I'm going to divide it over the 3 years that I have the lease term, okay? Then the finance company, and I'm not going to go into this today, interest rates on leases are in the general vicinity of loans. They're just calculated in a very different fashion, okay? So this is actually called a money factor, but it is the money factor equivalent to a 2.5% rate. I want to compare apples to apples here, okay? So the monthly interest you're going to pay is $43.76. The depreciation payment is literally, okay, I'm going to have this vehicle for 3 years and I'm going to use 11,000 of it. So 11,000 divided by 36 comes to 305.46. It is literally the portion you're using divided by the term.
Before you got anything else.
Before this other stuff. Yeah, what I'm trying to show is your lease payment is not just that divided. It's that plus a finance charge plus sales tax. Okay. So you start with this, you add the interest payment, you add the sales tax payment, and this is what you're left with. So you can see, this is one of the reasons why a lot of people have had a very bad experience with leasing, because 99% of salespeople don't understand this at all. So the grand mistake that takes place is a conversation never takes place of how much of the vehicle are you actually going to use. And what they do is they present the customer with a residual value that's based on a very low amount of miles. Because this point on the line moves this direction or that direction based on that calculation. Does that make sense? If this was a 20,000 mile a year lease, the line would move that way, and you would be paying for more of the vehicle. If it was a 10,000 mile lease, the line would move this way. That conversation rarely takes place, or it's very generalized and not expressed to the customer as how important that is. Because you're essentially estimating, again, how much I'm going to use of this vehicle. So this payment that's what this is this is literally a payment designed to be what you're going to use of the vehicle. Aside from, and that is based on a set value that they have determined. Market value can be completely different, which I'm going to get to here in a few minutes, okay? You could get to the end of this 3 years, the market value could be 17, the market value could be 12. Furthermore, that market value could be adjusted based on how you end. If you drive less mileage, if you drive more mileage than what you were expecting, okay? But that line is always determined by the estimate of mileage, and that's where a lot of problems take place. People drive away with a leased vehicle and don't understand that they are paying for an estimated usage of a vehicle. Therefore, if they use more, they have to pay more, and that's what people don't. They're just, they're blindsided at the end.
So if you have to pay, if you use more, you have to pay more.
Right.
If you use less, you have to pay less to get
Oh.
credit for that.
I'll get to that, yeah. Essentially, the way that's affected is it can cause, they're estimating your car be worth $15,500. It could be worth 16 or 16.5 or 17, all because you actually didn't keep pace with what it's just an estimate based on, if you use this much, this is how much it'll be used for. Well, if you use less, it could be worth more. If you use more, it could be worth less. I mean, it's on day one, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to estimate how much of this vehicle am I going to use, because that's what I'm going to pay for through this financial product called a lease. That's what I'm going to do. Okay. So let me go into some of the other details and things. I think it might smooth out some of the deals here. When you get to this point, you have options. That doesn't happen in a loan. When you do a 60-month loan, if you get to month number 36 and your job has changed, or you want another vehicle, or something else has happened, you don't get to call up your bank and say, hey, I'd really like some options. No, it doesn't work that way. It's a 60-month contract. This lease, you get options at that point. And people don't understand that these options exist a lot of times, and I'll give a couple of examples of it. But first option you have is you can purchase the vehicle. Okay? At that point, at this very point, when you reach this, you now have the option to buy a used vehicle at $15,500. That's the way it works. Okay? I mean, you can call your financing company and say, I want to pay it out. I want to put it on loan, whatever you want to do. It is literally like at that moment, you have a used car that only you have driven and can decide to buy it in whatever financing terms that you want. Okay? So in the prior example, and this is what I wanted to demonstrate, because this is going to be important when we calculate costs. This payment is obviously lower, right? Well, this payment is lower because of how we're dealing with this. While this residual value is 50% of the value of the vehicle, you're not paying on 50% because of all these credits in the front. You're paying on a smaller portion of that. So yeah, you have a $373 payment. Well, what I did was to compare apples to apples is you have a 60-month loan, right? Well, we're only 3 years into that example. If I finance the remaining amount at 2 more years, my payment would be $662. Does that make sense? So now I'm essentially making up for lost ground is what I'm saying. I'm trying to demonstrate that financially, the two are very similar, if not the same. At the end of everything, if you chose to buy this vehicle and pay the rest off over the next 2 years, and your buddy over here had done a 60-month loan, at the end of 60 months, you guys both end up with a car paying out about the exact same amount. That's what I'm trying to show you. Okay? It's just that the lease person got these options. So if you chose to buy it out, you could pay cash, you could finance it longer, you can do whatever you want. It's literally, you are talking about a 3-year-old used car with who knows how many miles that you can run. Yes.
So say you get to 3 years and it's valued, it's 15.5, is that what was expected?
15.5 is the expectation, correct.
Expected value.
That's the contract residual
Well,
amount.
let's say you used more than your 45,000 miles.
Yep.
Let's say you used 55,000.
Yep.
Okay. So now it's worth less.
In theory, yes, most likely.
But if you decide to buy it, you're gonna buy it for what it was originally evaluated at. Or
You are correct.
estimated at.
You're correct, yeah. Because
if
you've
you
only
didn't-
paid it
if you
down to
didn't,
that.
You would pay the mileage.
Yep, and I'll get to that, but you're right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the amount. Because
But
again,
they're
the,
getting 31,000.
again, the agreement on day one is you would only use it down to this line. So if you use it beyond this line, if you wish to buy it, that amount is
You're
ultimately
gonna buy
due.
it from that
Correct.
estimated, original estimated.
Correct. Okay, option number two, you trade in the vehicle at the current market trading value and pay off the residual. This is what this means, and this drives me nuts. I have had a family member do this about made me want to vomit because I'm the one that leased him his vehicle. Okay? Had a family member that we leased a vehicle. They use that vehicle significantly less than what the lease was actually designed. So while the lease was based on them using this much, they only use this much. What that can mean is that you pull in there and you may actually have equity to trade in that vehicle and get a plus on whatever future transaction you do. Trading it in. What my relative did is he walked in, handed them the keys, and turned in the vehicle, which is another option. But my point is he could have traded it or he could have sold it and actually redeemed the usage that he paid for but didn't use. That's the idea here. Okay?
They don't give you a check.
No, they can. Give me a check. Yeah, if you want to, well, I mean, if you want to trade it in, dealerships normally aren't going to want to buy your vehicle flat. Now, well, I say that, but you go talk to Tom Clark, Tim Schnelly, and a lot of these used car guys. I mean, I'll tell you flat out, my plan at the end of my truck is to go to Tom Clark first and say, you want to buy this? Because their dream used vehicle is a 3 to 5 year off lease vehicle.
One year,
That-
one owner.
Yeah, one owner,
Local.
perfect, yeah. I mean, it's a dream for them. It's great for them. But I'm only going to do that if that sale price is higher than my residual. That's the only time you would ever want to do this, is if the market value or the trading value exceeds that residual. Because if I can get $17,000 out of that vehicle and all I have to give my finance company is $15,500, I walk away with $1,500. And guess what that's called? That's equity in a lease. Okay? Because the whole idea, it's all about usage. I said I'd use this, but I didn't use that. I used less. Okay?
Is there a good chance you could take it back down? Or you gotta take it down there and they say, yeah, it's worth 17.5 now, and we'll give you that. They might give you a check, really, or they'll supply it.
All right, yeah, that's what I mean. It would become, if you're trading it in, it could be trading allowance towards your next vehicle. Which, and as we'll talk about, guess what that does to your payment here? You know, it comes off the next one. Okay? Selling the vehicle is the same way. You know, trading it in, I'm going to be very blunt. Unless you have only used half of what you said. You know, trade-in values, everyone knows. The dealer's going to give you less anyway. But a lot of people realize you also have the option to sell that. You can take your leased vehicle and stick it on Craigslist. And if you can get 18 out of this vehicle, you simply call up the finance company and say, I'm sending you a $15,500 check, and they're done. And that's it. And you walk away with your equity. Same thing. You would only do that if the market value is greater than the residual. And guys, I learned in the car business, there is a lot. I mean, this is a pretty risky guess on the part of the finance company. You know, when you buy a car, you are taking the risk of market value. I had, when I was working at the dealership, what were those called? Who made the Avalanche?
Shit.
First of all, has anyone here ever had an Avalanche?
It was the Chevy Avalanche.
The
Yeah, it's like
ugliest
pickup
vehicle
truck slash
ever.
plastic.
And we would see those things drive in and we would cringe because they were so ugly and so undesired as used vehicles that the market value of those 3-year-old Avalanches was nothing, was junk. So of course, when they went to trade it in and we offered them junk, people weren't too happy, okay? Well, if you bought that Avalanche, you're dealing with it. If you lease that Avalanche, your last option here is that you could, let's say you walk in at the end of your lease, you walk back into the dealer and say, you know, I'm kind of close to my miles. You know, I had 45,000 miles I could drive. I drove 42. You know, what's my vehicle worth? Well, you know, I mean, we're in a recession, you know, or GM lowered their price on new cars, which ultimately is hurting the value of you. Who knows how many economic conditions? You insert the thing here, and they say, if you were to trade it in today, we could give you $14,000 on trade. Okay, here's the keys. Okay, that risk of the market value being less than this is on the finance company. That's on them. So if that value is less than that, if you can't sell it, if you can't trade it in, that negative equity disappears. Ultimately, if you are in a lease, it is impossible for you. And that's the big kicker here. Is I have dealt with, since I was in the automobile industry, with a significant part of the population that remembers a day when vehicles held their value. Okay? Vehicles were seen as an investment. Vehicles are not an investment. Okay? They are a aggressively depreciating asset.
You mean our driveway's not full of investments?
When you can buy them like
That-
86 Ford's an investment. Classics, man.
Actually, let me correct myself.
I'm out here.
Please go.
New vehicles are not an investment. I'm actually glad you brought up that point, because simply because of the nature of the fact that I mean, it is true. You drive the vehicle off the lot, a third of the value is gone. It is the depreciation that makes leasing make sense. If the depreciation wasn't there, it wouldn't completely make sense. But there are benefits there that ultimately, if someone can shift their brain, and this is the hard thing, shift their brain from the idea that I am buying an asset to I am paying a monthly cost of living. That's what we used to encourage people to do, because that's what leasing does. It changes driving from me investing in something that I don't know what, I mean, in a way, I mean, we do the same thing with other types of investments. We don't know if the value is going to go up, we don't know if the value is going to go down, we don't know what's going to happen. It moves it from that to renting. You know, I think I told you guys, I might have told you the story, about a year and a half ago, I had a guy come in the office to look for an apartment, and he and his wife were being separated. And he had never rented before in his life. And I started giving him the prices for the apartment, and he was insulted. He's like, isn't that kind of stupidly high? I mean, why would I pay $500 for a 2-bedroom apartment when I could pay $500 house payment on a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a garage and a basement? Why in the world would I do that? And I said, it's a certain kind of service, but you need to keep in mind what that service entails. The day a person rents, they don't need lawnmowers anymore. They don't need hedge trimmers. They don't need to worry about their driveway or their sidewalk. They don't need to worry about their siding or their brick or their roof or their hot water heater or their furnace or their air conditioner or their refrigerator or their stove. They don't ever have to worry about that ever again. So instead of the homeowner taking the risk that one day my $600 water heater is going to go out and I'm going to have to pay $600. Right? Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's what I mean. It's ultimately that apartment takes a lot of, that's why a lot of elderly single, I mean, I have a lot of elderly single tenants. And in their case, they recognized that a long time ago, that there's a lot of this stuff that I don't want to deal with. I'm not, you know, in their case, maybe they didn't have the finances to have someone mow the yard, but they didn't want to deal with that. And they boiled all that down into a monthly cost of living is what they chose to do, okay? This is kind of the same thing. It accomplishes the same thing. Is it turns that driving into, it boils it down into a monthly
cost of living. Okay? Any questions on these options? Again, I'm going to keep going on here. I think it'll clarify pretty
I
well.
have one question. What about maintenance of the vehicle?
Oh, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll hit on all that. Because this agreement that you're going to drive, you're going to use this much of the vehicle does have stipulations. Because extra usage of the vehicle is not just miles, it's wear and tear. I mean, you can't show back up and say, I only drove 40,000 miles, but I lost the back half of the vehicle or an accident. I mean, you can't do that because that's extra, you know, if you keep thinking in your head as far as usage, wear and tear is a big part too. I'll talk about that in a second. Okay.
We'll go back on. The additional fees during the agreement.
Oh, turning in the vehicle. Okay, I'm glad I would skip right over it. So when you turn in that vehicle, there can be fees on a lease. Okay. Some lease companies can have, I mean, they can have a turn-in fee of a couple $100. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because a lot of those are very comparable and appropriate compared to the fees you pay when you do a loan. If anyone's ever bought a vehicle from a dealership, a lot of times you don't walk out of there without a $300 doc fee and a $200 administration fee and a $100 whatever fee. I mean, there's all types of fees built into that financing up front. Leases can have other fees, but most of the time they do not. For instance, I mean, I leased my truck. I didn't have a single lease initiation fee, startup fee, nothing. Some of them can, and that's where you just want to be aware of those things. But that's the same way with a loan. You know, some dealerships may offer you the loan with a $100 documentation fee. Some may charge $600. You know, it can vary.
Do you ask first?
I think it's yeah. I would ask what do I have to do to start? I mean, I asked that question. I asked the guy. I asked Jeff Reedman. I said, "Is there any initiation fees? Is there any upfront fees?" Nope. Just the first payment. It can be there.
What?
But see, a lot of
What?
times those,
It was already made.
a lot of times, ultimately, the finance company exists to make money. And their ways to make money are fees and interest. So the company that charges a $500 lease initiation fee may have a lower internal interest rate than what I got. And, you know, I mean, so I really think most of the time that's there. If you're dealing with a reputable dealership or reputable company, that, you know, it's appropriate. You know, it works. So now let's say you get to the end. You drive back in there and you've driven 50,000 miles. Okay. The deal was that you would drive 45. Again, think usage. I promised and I paid for using 45,000 miles. I used 50. That then affects what happens in all these options, and Russ pointed that out well. If I'm going to buy the vehicle, it doesn't matter. I know I have to pay $15,500. The mileage doesn't mean squat. It doesn't matter if there's a massive hole in the roof if I'm going to buy it. Because at that point, I'm paying the agreed upon residual price to take the vehicle. If I sell it or trade it in, those things don't matter as long as the residual is paid off. As long as the finance company gets this portion back, they don't care. If you have a massive hole in the roof and you drove 10,000 extra miles and you can get 16,000 out of it, good for you. And sometimes that can happen. You know, again, it may have heavy wear and tear, but the market value of that vehicle may be higher because it's desirable. You know, who knows, whatever reason. You know. What it does affect is when you turn in the vehicle. So when you turn in the vehicle, you're essentially saying, okay, I have done what we agreed. I just want to be done with this vehicle for whatever reason. That's fine. But in the case that you have used more of the vehicle than you agreed to, you have to pay for it. Okay? And that's where if you lease a vehicle, the finance company on day one is going to send you some type of metric to determine wear and tear. They're going to send you a very detailed guide saying, if you know, for instance, I literally got something that has a hole in it that big. I mean, a little card. And if I can run that card all over the body of the truck and there's nothing bigger than that hole, it's not charged at the end of the lease because that's considered appropriate wear and tear. If I have a gash down the side of my vehicle, Just like if you were buying the car, you're expected to deal with those things either through insurance or yourself taking care of, because that's more of the vehicle you used. That gash will affect market value. And that's not what they agreed on back here with this $15,000. If I have went over extra miles, you have used more of the vehicle. You know, I know everyone's bad experience normally comes down to those miles, but the logic makes sense. I have only paid to use this. If I go over that, you're typically going to pay between 15 and 25 cents a mile. Okay? And as I will demonstrate to you here in a little bit, that is perfectly reasonable.
Well, this is 26.
Did you already do the math?
Yeah.
So you're having to quit. I'll get to that. I'm the one
Well,
I'm the one conveying
I'd
wisdom
always
here.
heard that the overage charge was ridiculous, and then when I did
Exactly.
it,
Then you do
I'm
the
like,
math.
well, this is 29 cents a mile.
Exactly.
I heard it was like 15 or 14
Exactly.
or something like that.
In fact, little side note, some people strategically do leases at the lowest possible amount, and then they pay the mileage charge at the end, because in a way it's actually discounted. So, and I'll get to that here in a second, yes.
One thing you might get to, if you lease that vehicle for your business, and you take that whole lease price off.
Nice. Hold on, I'm getting there. Here, I'm getting to the benefits. The benefits are 2 slides away. Okay. Yes.
When you sign the lease, do you have the option of making the mileage higher?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I mean, after we had that training at Goodwin Brothers, we had a process. We would sit down with people, and first of all, we would show them a comparison, because the payment just blows their mind. But then instantly everyone thinks like, how am I getting ripped off? If this payment is so much lower. And the first thing we would ask them is, we would get into it. We wouldn't be like, oh, you'd probably drive 15,000 miles. No, we would say, tell me about your daily activity. Tell me about your current car. How long have you had it? How many miles have you put on it? And we would structure, I did 12,000 mile leases, Tina. I did 25,000 mile leases. Because the concept remains the same, but this line, you really want to be as accurate as possible. I mean, I didn't want a customer coming in and they had driven 80,000 miles. And that happens sometimes. I mean, you had a stupid salesman who gave someone a 12,000 mile a year lease that was commuting an hour a day. I mean, just ludicrous. They come in with 80 to 100,000 miles and 15, 20 cents a mile times. I mean, they use the car. They owe that logically, but that doesn't mean they were expecting it or happy about it. You know? So on a 25,000 mile lease, this line would move much farther this way. The payment would go up, but they still have those benefits of the term. You know, all the benefits, all the details still remained, but it was more tailored to what they wanted to do. You know? So yes, you can do it. You can do a 10,000 mile lease. You can do a 35,000 mile year lease. You can do 40,000. I mean, that's fine. Okay, some extra details real quick. First of all, the effective down payment. Okay, this is another thing that is really cool about leasing. It's subtracted from the ending financing amount. I showed you guys that here. That down payment comes off of this. Okay, keep in mind we are only addressing half the vehicle. So if you pay down, an example here. If you pay down $3,000 on a $15,500 amount to be financed over 3 years, that is going to have a significantly larger monthly effect than if you pay down $3,000 on a 60-month loan. Okay? That $3,000 on a 60-month loan, are you guys done? You check.
Oh, that's me.
Oh, sorry. One of the kids barely went on. The sink won't shut off?
Like a constant drip, and then the water in the sink is filling up. And the drain is open, but nothing's going on.
Kitchen sink will drain.
All right. Can you just reposition the handle? You should be able to get the drip off as long as you get the
No,
drip
I
off.
have moved it all around.
That's fine, if not. Well, those handles are, you should be able to lift it straight up and down. It should shut off the drips. So I wanted to show that there. If you actually want to put money down on lease, which a lot of times I would recommend, I think it's better to put the cash in your pocket. But if you do that, credits toward a lease have a significantly larger impact than they do towards a loan. That is partly why you're ending up with this phenomenon then. Okay? Part of the reason this is happening is because this $3,000 credit is having a significantly bigger impact than it is over here. Does that make sense? And that's just simple math. 3,000 divided by 36 is $83. $3,000 divided by 60 is 50. Okay? The reality about mileage, we've already kind of hit on this. In our example, was a 45,000 mile lease on a $31,000 vehicle. If this vehicle survives, let's say the life of the vehicle is 200,000 miles. Actually, I came up with 16 cents per mile. Did I do on that one? Well, it depends on the mileage.
I was just doing the 45,000.
Oh, gotcha, yep. Well, what I'm trying to show is let's try to figure out the cost per mile of the total life of the vehicle. Okay, if that sucker survives 200,000 miles, I know they can go a little above that. I know that, but if it's 200,000 miles divided by the $31,000 price tag, it costs you 16 cents a mile to drive that vehicle. And all I'm trying to demonstrate is the extra mileage charge is normally it's 10 to 25 cents per mile, depending on the company. I'm just trying to show this is reasonable. Because normally in the story of the person that got ripped off by the lease, this was just insane. Well, it felt insane because they owed that amount on 50,000 miles or something, which, again, I'm trying to demonstrate it's all because it was structured incorrectly. They should have been paying for that in their monthly payment. But that payment was incorrect because they didn't properly estimate. Okay, so when you figure, the life of the vehicle, it costs 16 cents a mile anyway. 15 to 25 cents is not. And like Russ said, technically for the first part of the vehicle, you're really paying closer to 29 cents a mile. And that's where people sometimes strategically, they may do the math and say, well, I drive 20,000 miles a year. And they look at the payment on a 20,000 mile lease, and they look at the payment on a 12,000 mile lease. And they do some math, and they figure, you know what, I'd actually be getting a discount to just buy the excess mileage. I mean, sometimes it works out. Okay. Benefits to leasing.
Thank you.
It's not new care. One benefit to leasing, guys, is you have a new car all the time. Now, I'm going to talk about, again, this is about Christian stewardship, okay? I'm going to talk about this, but I'm just lining out the official blanket for human beings driving cars, benefits to leasing, okay? You have a new car all the time. You have a car in today's world that is always under a bumper-to-bumper warranty. No more tires, no more engine, no more AC, no more furnace, or furnace or heater, or whatever it's called. No more. Kim started laughing. All that stuff that goes wrong. Typically, Rachel and I got a used van 5 months ago. We just put $550 in it for new pads and new rotors, and it needed spark plugs and wires because something was missing. And I understand that's all part of the used car. I'll get to the fiscal responsibility of that here in a minute. But ultimately, the person who does this, you are under a bumper warranty the entire time, and you have a new vehicle. Okay. You delay sales tax, which a lot of Americans are happy about. If you buy the vehicle in any fashion, that sales tax is getting paid up front, period. Okay? You buy a $31,000 vehicle, you're going to pay $1,800 something in sales tax on day one, whether you finance it or you pay it in cash. That does not happen with a lease. With a lease, you only pay sales tax on what you use, so it's built into your monthly payment. Okay? Fewer upfront costs. Most of the time, that works out that way. Again, there can be lease initiation fees or whatever, But most of the time, you end up with less. I mean, literally, guys, I did not have a single fee to start up on my truck. None. If you go do a loan at US Bank, you'll get away with a $150 documentation fee and maybe some title fees and stuff for $50 or something like that. I mean, that's pretty low. If you go through a dealership, you're going to pay sometimes $500 to $600 in fees and all kinds of stuff. Those are just fees. That's just fees to buy the vehicle. Most of the time, and not to mention your sales tax. It allows greater month-to-month affordability. This is one thing as Christians I would encourage you to consider. Okay. Well, I don't, as I'm going to get to here in a minute. Well, I don't necessarily want to encourage the somewhat American spoiled desire to need a new vehicle all the time. Vehicles are what I'm saying, okay? They are not an investment. They simply are not. So now if we are actually dealing with the financial stewardship of month-to-month cash flow, this provides more vehicle for lower month-to-month cash flow. That's accurate in the case that you will always have that cost. And that's where each individual needs to determine. As I'm going to get to here in a minute, this is not the most fiscally, officially responsible way to buy a vehicle by any means. But in my opinion, it is the best way to buy a new vehicle if you have determined you want to drive new vehicles. Okay? So it allows greater month-to-month affordability. I don't know if you guys saw the example. A pretty significant payment difference on our $31,000 vehicle. Okay? Removes risk of market values. I've already went over that. All the risk is on the finance company. It turns driving into a monthly cost over your lifetime. Okay, it's a recognition that new vehicles are not an investment. They're not. Okay, because of the reality of depreciation. When I worked at Goodwin Brothers, it was probably a year after Chrysler went out in Newcastle, and I dealt with a lot of old Chrysler guys that they were used to just 5-10 years before. They could come in and buy a $38,000 truck, and they could drive that truck back 6 months later and get about 35 for it on trade. I mean, that existed that recent. Okay, part of that was because it was a Chrysler town, all this stuff. It was not fun explaining to those guys that reality had went away, because that $38,000 truck driven back 6 months later was now worth $28,000. I mean, it dropped that significantly. And tax deduction for business owners.
Thank you.
Okay. If you have a business, and I won't get into a lot of this talk tomorrow, okay, but there are reasons why a lot of major corporations and a lot of businesses lease vehicles for their executives. Because again, their thought process is why do we want equity in cars, positive or negative? When I got into real estate, it amazed me how many major corporations don't want to own a building. And I thought, isn't that stupid? They're paying the taxes, the maintenance on the building, and the insurance for the building. Why don't they want to own the building? Because ownership ultimately takes dollars from a usable nature for a business and puts it in equity in real estate. And they don't want to mess with that.
There's actually one that's selling their building
And leasing.
and leasing them back.
Yep. I mean, Walmart actually building their building up here was very unusual, and it was an experiment that really didn't work out too well. Most major, you drive by Burger King, they don't own that. Taco Bell doesn't own that. Give me some other, Pizza Hut, they don't own that. McDonald's doesn't own that. Papa John's doesn't own that. Okay? Those companies don't own that. Huh? A lot of times, small businesses that haven't figured it out yet. I mean, I hate to say that, but I have talked to I work with a lot of small business people in this area that their dream was to own their place of business. And I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. I'm just saying with ownership comes responsibility and frustration. There are benefits, just like what I went over earlier, leasing an apartment. There are benefits to leasing a space, Burger King knows they can close that store at any time, eliminate their wage expense, eliminate their marketing, change stuff around, and they can walk away, and they don't have to pass that property off to some real estate department where they're paying wages and they're paying marketing and they're subject to the market. I mean, nope, they walk away.
With the busters, what they're going to do right now, trying to sell it.
Right.
They're trying to sell it.
Yep. So in this situation, a lot of major there's a reason why businesses lease vehicles. The same sort of thing. They can offer a nice benefit to their employees. They have no unknowns in maintenance because it's bumper to bumper warranty all the time, and they just have a monthly cost. They have a monthly expense that is always consistent.
If they take the tax deduction off, can they still take mileage?
What do you mean that?
If they take the lease payment off for taxes, can they still take their mileage?
No, correct?
Yeah, you're the tax
If it's used 100% for business, yes, you can write off the lease payment and your gas.
In
Or
gas, right.
Well, your mileage, or if you're reimbursing an employee for mileage or something, that would be a deduction. Yes.
But the business itself, no. The business's deduction is the payment. And then if they're putting fuel, if they're paying for the fuel as a business expense, that's something else that makes the car run. If they do have to, if for some reason something happens that they have to fix the car, if they have to put tires on the car, that's a deductible expense. But the mileage is already built into the payment. The mileage is really the payment.
They can
So
write
that's-
off the payment, but they can't write off the depreciation.
Exactly. It's kind of the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, you can't, the whole point of writing off mileage on a person, on a vehicle that is not leased is you're saying my business is using this much of the car. Well, in a lease, that's all inclusive. It's all calculated and works. Everything in that becomes a deduction.
You can deduct gas.
Right. Because gas is something separate it takes to run that vehicle, just like a random repair.
So let me ask this. So then.
Sorry, Chad.
Oh, you're fine.
I'm sorry, I didn't see he had his hand.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Oil changes, yada, yada, are these under the lease or you responsible?
That is, you are required, as part of your agreement to use that vehicle appropriately, you are required for appropriate maintenance. And that is another place where some people get in trouble because they don't properly maintain the vehicle. So like I said, I used a dramatic example, but they drive in there at the mileage, but there's potential engine problems because they didn't change the oil when they were supposed to, or they didn't take care of this, or they didn't fix that.
Do you have to supply food, change the oil, yada, yada,
It's unlikely, but they're going to inspect their vehicle when they give it back. If they determine, they're going to have mechanics go over it, and if there's sludge coming out of someone, they're going to determine that. But, there may be horror stories out there of leasing companies that get pretty particular, but there's always two sides to the story. If Uncle Billy is telling you that the dumb lease company charged him $500 because supposedly it was bad, I'd be more inclined to think Uncle Billy didn't do his side of it, because otherwise a lease company wouldn't be in business. They are there to finance an agreement for you to drive the vehicle for a term and take care of it within like I said, I can have a gash in the side of my truck and it won't count because it's, if it's that big, because, it's reasonable wear and tear. But you can't have a key swipe down the side of the vehicle. So, sorry, hold on 1 second.
Two questions. First one was actually a serious question. Is there any benefit to say you got a 45,000 mile lease, whatever it is, you're going to go over, to pay more ahead?
You can actually pre-purchase mileage.
Right, I was going to say
Like
that.
if you're afraid it's going to be a cash flow issue,
Right.
you can you could walk in the dealership or call the finance company and say, I think I want to buy 1,000 miles.
I was going to say
Tack it on to my list.
exact same scenario, but added on to that, if you know that you're going to buy it in the long run to try to save on some of those fees, can you pay more during the lease to try to help offset that?
No, it wouldn't work out that way because your agreement is only on this amount. This value is uncontracted.
Okay,
So you'd be better off if you knew you were going to do that,
right.
to shove the money in a savings account or something. And then when you hit this line, then when you go to get your loan or whatever you're going to do to pay for the rest of this, you could pay it down. Okay. But no, as far as a lease, you can't, one thing that is very different in a lease than a loan is if you prepay principal on a loan, technically your interest charge is reduced. That does not happen in a lease. It is all contractual from day one with a built-in interest charge. You would never want to pay an extra amount. Because at that, I mean, you're essentially just prepaying future payments, which if you want to do and have a few months at the end where you pay nothing, so be it. But I would never recommend it. You're not actually saving finance charge by doing it. You're just prepaying.
So the second is more of a common sense statement because common sense is an endangered species now. If there's a leased vehicle, it is still the driver's responsibility to make sure it's valid.
Yeah, you're responsible. I mean, you go get plates. You get plates.
Don't talk to Fate Memorial because I impounded 5 of the cars before they realized it. They never kept it valid for like 2.5, 3 years. So when they sent someone to pick them up, they sent the car that wasn't valid for 2.5, 3 years. So I just did the same thing.
You are entrusted with the vehicle. You are responsible for insurance on that vehicle. You are responsible for plates.
Someone out of the vehicle or just your portion of the vehicle?
That's a very good question. A very popular product when people buy vehicles is something called gap insurance. Okay, gap insurance is I'm going to drive away with my $31,000 vehicle on a 5-year loan. I pull off the curb, it's now worth 25. I owe 31. I wreck down the street. Where's the other 6 come from? Because the insurance company is only paying 25. That's what gap insurance is called. That same phenomenon can happen with this. The same thing can happen. You need to be insured on the vehicle, but your financial responsibility at any given time for that vehicle, if that vehicle gets totaled, is the total sum of these payments and this $15,500. Yeah. Because I mean, again, think of usage. I mean, yes, I'm only paying to use this vehicle, but if the rest of it gets used up by being T-boned by a vehicle, I'm still responsible for that. And that's where your insurance will come in. But that's why gap insurance is often sold on leases just as much as it is on car loans.
And plates cost
Plates are your date.
1,000, not just 14,000.
Plates are always determined by the market value of the vehicle. So yeah, that's irrelevant to how much you owe. It's based on what it's worth. So plates, registration, which I'll also throw in, at least I think this is right, I'm going to be sad at the end of the year, but with it being a business vehicle, at that point it clears up a lot of those additional charges, such as insurance and plates and registration. Those are all business expenses for the small business owner at that point. It's very clear. And again, that's why major companies leasing vehicles is a no-brainer. I mean, all of your police departments, all that stuff, for the most part, they all lease. I mean, a lot of them do that. They will lease for a time. Sometimes they buy them at the end. But if a public service entity is doing okay on cash flow, they will always lease over buy.
They lease hundreds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, all the time.
And they're always, on their website, they're always trying to sell.
Yep. Well, exactly. It's genius. They'll try to sell them leading up to the date. If they can't get them sold, they can just hand them back. But if they can get money on that, I mean, they'll stick it on their website. And I knew a lot of people that they figured that out years ago. They would keep an eye on Fastenal's website or whatever. A lot of times, Fastenal could sell it for more than their residual, but less than market value, and you get a good deal on a truck buying it from a company like that.
That's the problem with our local apartments is they didn't lease it, they bought it, so now they're fighting, trying to get,
Right.
because they got a really good deal, bought them at the same time, so now they're all buying at the same time.
Right.
But
Yeah, that's why I wanted to throw in that caveat. If a public service can afford a constant monthly cash flow, but if they're buying a vehicle, at that point they're essentially deciding to take a little bit of risk on the back end and see if they can get a little bit of time where they don't have that cash flow. So that's benefits, drawbacks to leasing. Okay, you will always have a car payment. Now I say this, and having worked at a new car dealership, I learned something pretty quickly. And I'm not saying, in my opinion, this should not relate to us as Christians, but there was a significant portion of the population that no matter how good their intentions were, could not stand it. They were back every single 3 years. I can't even come up with how many people I talked to that said, I don't want to lease because I want to pay my vehicle off. I want to own my vehicle one day. Great. How old are you? 50. Have you ever not had a car payment? No. They were back all the time. I mean, when they were getting, partway along in the process, they'd come back and start over. And that wasn't necessarily bad. But the big drawback was the depreciation. That was, I remember asking, when I did the car business thing for a little while, I remember asking a guy, I'm like, how does this work? You see on TV people coming in and negotiating, and I can understand that on used cars, but how does it work on a new car? I mean, the sticker price is a sticker price. And I'll never forget the day I was told they don't negotiate the price of the new vehicle, they negotiate their trade-in. And buddy, I learned that, people would drive from dealership to dealership to dealership to dealership to see who gave them the most money for their vehicle. And it was always such a huge pain because they always owed more money on their trade-in than it was worth. So they were just trying to realize, how do I take less of a hit? Well, you realize all those customers, one thing we were so big on selling them on leases, it's like, guys, your payment is this because we have to take $3,000 from your old vehicle and shove it in here. Stop the bleeding, With leasing, you never have negative equity. In fact, we did a lot of leases, presented it to people as, this is a machine that will eliminate your negative equity for you. So they would come in, and on this, they actually wouldn't have a credit here. We would have to add negative equity in. Their payment would be higher, but guess what happened in 3 years? They came back, their payment drops $100. They never have negative equity again. They got their car new every 3 years like they wanted, and they live happily ever after. It was great. But the Avalanche customers were just a nightmare trying to, not only was their loan payment huge on a loan, but you throw on another $5,000 of negative equity onto that, and that increases the payment by another $100. It was just nuts. And so, leases, one of the drawbacks, you always have a payment, but as I've already said, recognizing it as a cost of driving. I love my grandfather very, very much, but I had a conversation with him years ago because I had done this research on leasing, and he wasn't a fan of that. And he expressed that they were, blessed that he was able to buy his truck with cash. I think at the time his truck was 8 or 9 years old. And I said, yeah, you haven't paid a car payment. And I said, how much was that truck brand new? And it was, was it $33,000? How much is it now? 16? Well, let me see. 16,000 divided by X number of years. So you have paid a $300 a month car payment. Because of the depreciation is my whole point. The depreciation, you are paying the cost of that vehicle. Now, a person who can do that ultimately saves the finance charge, which is significant. And a person who's going to buy a vehicle and legitimately and truly keep it for a very long term comes, and I'm going to get to that, that is more fiscally responsible, in my opinion, stewardly responsible. Okay? But if you're going to finance a vehicle, this is a very effective way to do that. You have to pay extra usage during the term. I talked about mileage, wear and tear. I'll try to finish up quickly here. You can't customize the vehicle. That's not a big deal for a lot of people, but it's, you can't lease a truck and put in a fifth wheel hitch or whatever. You really can't do that in some ways. Okay? You can't permanently alter it in any way. If you do, it has to go back. Fastenal, all those trucks that are coming off their leases, they've taken all their stickers and everything off. You can't just hang the back with a bunch of stickers on it that they have to deal with. It has to be put back with appropriate wear and tear when it goes back to the company. Okay? Here's my thoughts from my experience. Leasing I worded this very carefully. Okay? It mostly makes sense for people who have determined that they will want the benefits and features of new cars in a given time. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that's bad. I'll tell you what, when I have to put $550 into our used van, it's kind of nice to know I never have to get tires in my truck, ever. And if that happened to my truck, we just take it in for free. And it gets, if you determine that that is something that you're going to want and ultimately try to achieve or have, leasing makes sense. Or someone who is 100% confident they will drive the new car until the wheels fall off and just want a checkpoint in the middle of a long-term financing approach, okay? People they're pretty distasteful about 8-year auto loans. I mean, they're out there, okay? But the truth of the matter is, if you actually are going to drive that vehicle forever, you know, I had one customer, I remember, one, who drove in there with 15-year-old vehicles. Two, he and his wife came in, they bought them on the same day, 15 years before, taking great care of them, driven them through an appropriate amount of life, and they came in and bought 2 more vehicles, brand new, to do again. That was one customer. Most people didn't have the discipline or ran into other issues. If you are legitimately going to do that, 8 years of financing from a cash flow standpoint isn't completely a bad thing, okay? Rates on vehicles are extremely low. You know, the big concern that you'll read all over the internet and every news article everywhere about long-term financing is the depreciation outpaces you like crazy. That's the whole problem. Well, if you're keeping it beyond the financing point, who cares? Yeah, who cares? Doesn't matter.
It does come a point to take care of that probably.
Yeah, it crisscrosses.
And then
Yeah.
they go down as far as they're going to go down.
Yeah. I mean, if you have any desire whatsoever to get rid of a vehicle in a few years, then I do shorter term financing because you're going to have to do that to keep up with depreciation. But if you're going to pay it off, whether you pay it off in 4 years or 10 years, you know. So a lease, as I demonstrated, it's kind of like a big loan with a dot in it. Okay. I showed you guys doing a 3-year lease and then a 2-year loan. You don't have to do that. You can do a 3-year lease and then you can do a 3-year loan or a 4-year loan, whatever. But it's also someone who can confidently fulfill the mileage, maintenance, and wear and tear requirements. Okay? At this point in life, I probably wouldn't lease a vehicle for my wife because my kids are messy. Okay? I mean, seriously. I mean, it's just, we're going to end up with stains on the seats and that kind of stuff. I mean, that is wear and tear that ultimately we would pay for at the end of the lease. Vehicles are not investments. They're aggressively depreciating assets. I can't encourage everyone in that mindset. Okay? When you buy a new vehicle, you are paying a lot of money for new. That's what you're paying for. You're paying for new. You're not paying this because you find that same vehicle 2 years old down the street and it's 60% of that original price tag. You are paying for new. Neither leasing or buying, I want to make this very clear, a new car is the least cost option of driving a vehicle. It simply is not. Professionals say buying a 3 to 5 year old vehicle and driving it for 5 to 7 years, selling it and starting over, is officially everything involved: depreciation, insurance, maintenance. That is the least cost option. Okay, but again, if you've decided, if it's something you wish to have or wish to do with a new vehicle, leasing makes sense. Leasing's bad rep largely comes from a payment focus. Okay? I think I have on here greedy salesmen and greedy customers. Seriously. The customer sees the loan payment. I really don't want that. I want this payment. Okay, well, that has mileage restrictions. I don't want that. But I want the lease payment, you know. And a lot of times it comes from it being restructured. So you get customers at the end, the salesman's gone, they've turned over, okay, you know, and people are upset. But if it's structured correctly, it can make a lot of sense. Inaccurate mileage is really where that comes from. An inaccurate estimate. Any questions? I didn't expect this one to be so fascinating. I think it is too. People, like I said, I mean, you talk to 50 people on the street who have leased a vehicle, and I guarantee you 49 of them are going to have bad things to say, and maybe it's understanding. So. Any other questions? I think it has its points. You know, the only reason I would encourage, I'd be hesitant to Tina's question earlier to do a longer mileage lease is some of these the automobile companies themselves lower internal interest and lower fees and sometimes raise residual values to encourage short-term leases. So sometimes on a 25 or 30,000 mile lease, just the internal factors may not make it as attractive in a way, but all the benefits are made. All the benefits are there. But I'm just saying, if, another reason that Goodwin Brothers was focusing on that at that time is they saw we were getting, in 2004 or so, I think is when I was selling, the economy was bad, Chrysler had went out. I mean, they needed monthly cash flow. I mean, you don't want to hope for 150 car sales and have 50, and leasing was going to be it was going to be great for their customers because there wasn't going to be this constant battle. It was going to be great for the dealership because we get 3 years down the road, we just pull up a list and start calling people. Hey, your lease is up, come on in. We'll lower your payment because now your negative equity is gone. And by the way, a lot of times if you've been leasing a vehicle, you get additional rebates. Sometimes you get lease cash or lease rebates.
What is a qualified first-time buyer? I hear it all the time. Available to qualified first-time buyers. Oh, whoa, one more time. Available to qualified first-time buyers.
That just means
If you're, what is?
I'll get, that's the next section, that's credit report.
What are these people?
That's ultimately said, they're covering themselves, that not everyone gets this. If you come in here and your credit stinks and you don't have any income.
Qualified first-time.
Full-time, first-time buyer means someone who has, but
And then
some,
there's well-qualified buyers too. I've heard of well-qualified.
but sometimes that comment actually says something that I'll get to later, that sometimes if you have a relationship with a finance company, a second-time buyer with the same finance company, sometimes underwriting eases up slightly because they have a history, they have a direct history.
Well-qualified, I get it.
That could be something. But anyway, I'm not saying high mileage leases don't make sense, but there's, like I said, there are industries sometimes, that may do very high mileage leases. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Duke Energy, who sends their technicians all over the wazoo, lease all their trucks. It's very possible. Because again, it boils it all down into we have our monthly cost as a business to run these trucks, as opposed to, well, this one, the engine just went out, or it normalizes that whole thing.
I'm surprised that school corporations don't lease buses. Maybe some do. But we
Are you sure they don't?
We have a rotational purchase of, I think, 6 buses a year.
And sometimes, like I said, sometimes people do buy, but they take the approach of leasing. Some organizations may buy vehicles, but they have in their policies, okay, after 5 years, we're going to start selling these. We're going to get rid of them before the wear and tear. And before, see, all of those risk assessments are built into a lease.
Franklin County School, they contract out the bus. They don't do it themselves.
Yep.
So they just had a flat payment for that contract. Yeah, Franklin County.
But see, essentially what I just said, I mean, that's what that school corporation is doing in a way. It's just they're doing it with new buses. But they're going off statistics. That's why I'm not saying leasing is the only smart way. I mean, that's not the only smart way to do it. I'm just saying a lot of people buy and they are not prepared or structured to deal with the depreciation, and that ends up becoming a pitfall later on. If they have to get rid of that vehicle after 3 years because their jobs have changed, they still might not have caught the depreciation at that point. If you have a 6-year loan on a brand new vehicle, after 3 years, you are still upside down. You still have negative equity. On a lease, you can hand it in, walk away, and go buy a used car for $2,000. So, but no, in that case, they're using those statistics to keep it rotating. It's just a lease kind of builds that all in. Any other questions? Appreciate the questions, comments. Yeah.
This could enter in a whole new conversation, but we're talking about instead of buying a new car, go down the road and pick out one that's depreciated and get it half price.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? I know it's not a lemon or.
Well, it could be, but mathematically, that's what I'm saying. I just had to put $550 in that van, okay, after 6 months. However, that $550 plus my lower payment that I'm paying on a 7-year-old van is still way lower than I would have been, getting a loan on a brand new. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what I'm saying. All things considered, your total out-of-pocket money. Again, professionals say, so you can go to Consumer Reports, and they're gonna say, if you're looking for the lowest cost of the necessary evil of driving a car, that's how to do it. And that went right along. I remember my driver's ed teacher telling me at 16 years old, she said, you buy a 2-year-old car, drive it for 5 or 6 years, sell it, buy a 2-year-old car. You know, but that comes with hassle. You know, I mean, peace of mind is part of this whole thing. I mean, gosh, I hardly ever sold any cars in my adult life. We just had to sell like 3 vehicles this year, and it's a pain in the neck. And you get to a point where you want to get rid of it. Yeah, I mean, I gave it away you kind of left wondering. All that stuff goes away in a type of financing agreement like this. I couldn't bring I wasn't gonna do it. I could not bring myself to park it over. I know, that's how everyone sells theirs. Just, I don't know.
Take your plates off,
Park.
or you'll be stripped by the time you come back. Seriously, Jason.
I would have been the first guy in 10 years that they would have stolen my vehicle.
I know there's still parts of it they need. That's why he parked over there, took his plate off, but got the lock and come back. They took the door switches and stuff out of the city. That's those parts. And yeah, he was so mad.
Any other questions?
Do you know how many people get offended when you tell them driving is a privilege, not a right, though? Oh, it's great. I love people's reactions. That's one of the benefits of my job.
It's not in there anywhere? Okay. Guys, again, appreciate the comments. I'll throw it in real quickly just so I don't get emotional. Appreciate you guys very much with my family and my dad and everything. We will, given we don't have memorization class this week, we got Thanksgiving. Hope everyone enjoys their time with their families. We'll be back next week. We'll have morning assembly. Then that's the 4th Sunday, so we won't have any following that. So let's close out in prayer. Pray God of heaven, Lord, we always thank you for the opportunities, Lord, to think and reason. Lord, we thank you that we have such a compassionate God who gives the ability to think through things. And Lord, that you have granted us wisdom within the concept of your will. Lord, I pray that you would always act and make decisions. We know that Jesus Christ never dealt with buying a vehicle, but Lord, you dealt with many things and exercised wisdom and discernment in those things, and we can definitely draw from those things as we make decisions in this life. Lord, I pray that the goal of our decisions would always be to your glory and furtherance of the kingdom. Lord, with this resource that you've given us and money and time, Lord, I pray we might be good stewards of these things, again, so that they might be used effectively for you. We thank you for the needs that you provide, and Lord, we just pray that you might be glorified in our lives as we leave here and begin to do these things in Jesus' name.
Hey, no, there is a trash can.